Today on StateScoop's Priorities podcast, brought to you by Scoop News Group, new steps forward for digital equity efforts in New York City. Welcome to StateScoop's Priorities podcast. Every Wednesday, you'll get insights into the state and local government community. You'll hear from top leaders and learn about the latest news and trends ahead for the industry. I'm your host, Jake Williams. Here's what's happening this week. Oklahoma has named a new chief information security officer. Daniel Langley, who most recently served in Washington State's Information Technology Bureau, has taken the role. He also served as CISO of the Washington State Lottery and spent almost a decade with the U.S. Army, where he finished as a captain in the Signal Corps. Following an expansion of efforts to bolster digital equity across the 5 boroughs, New York City's Office of Technology and Innovation Monday kicked off its Digital Inclusion Week. The event is part of a national collection of events co-hosted by the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, designed to raise awareness. While more states are embracing data-driven governance, many chief data officers still struggle with limited resources and weak institutional power, according to a recent review of state CDOs. Most state CDO offices operate with budgets of less than $1 million and manage small teams, yet they're expected to coordinate data strategies across agencies, according to a report from NASIO and the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation. You can find these stories and more at statescoop.com and in links in today's show notes. New York City is updating its digital equity roadmap. The roadmap, first introduced this year, includes initiatives to close the gap in broadband service availability citywide. Paolo Balboa, the city's chief digital equity officer, tells StateScoop's Keely Quinlan how the roadmap and the city's digital equity working group are expected to improve connectivity.
You were named the Chief Digital Equity Officer of New York City back in June. Leading up to that moment, though, what in your career kind of prepared you for this moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. Great place to start. Without sounding too corny, I feel like my career path and my life has been building towards this moment. 10 years ago, I got my start in public libraries. I was working for the Cleveland Public Library for 5 years. And what I was doing there for 5 years, I started out teaching computer classes. I was creating curriculum to deliver Microsoft Word for seniors at adult centers in Cleveland. I was working at the Public Computing Center in downtown Cleveland, just sort of helping people ad hoc with any computer-related issue that they might have, whether that's, I forgot the password to my Facebook account, or I need to make a resume. I was doing that really on the ground for 5 years in Cleveland, and I really got to get a flavor for what this work is and why it matters, really. So back in 2018, an organization called the National Digital Inclusion Alliance hosted their annual conference, which is called Net Inclusion. That year in 2018, they decided to host it in Cleveland. So I got connected with the planning committee in Cleveland, which then exposed me to a wider world of practitioners who think about the word digital equity and think about the word digital inclusion in a very intentional way. So I got to leave my little bubble of, just teaching this person how to click with a mouse into a wider world where I got to get connected with practitioners, advocates, researchers, people who thought about this work in a really intentional way. So from there, I decided, I think I like this world enough. I think I want to take it as seriously as I can. So I went to grad school in New York. I was working for the New York Public Library throughout grad school. And there I was working for a program called Tech Connect, where I was doing essentially the same thing, a similar version of what I was doing in Cleveland, teaching computer classes, helping people ad hoc. And from there, I joined an organization. I eventually joined that organization, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, 5 years ago. Within that organization, I really tried to take what I was doing in libraries and apply it to a more broad spectrum of organizations and other types of community anchor institutions. So I ended up writing something called the Digital Navigator Toolkit. We can talk a little bit about that later on in our conversation. I started to focus a bit on coalition building. I started to work very closely with local, regional, and state governments to help them first write digital equity plans and then take them a step further and help implement those plans. So all of which is to say is that earlier this year, when I saw this job posting open up for the city of New York, I was like, I think I have to take this. This seems tailor-made for everything that I'm interested in. And I've been living in New York for several years at this point, and I'm glad to be here.
That's incredible. I love serendipitous moments like that where it seems like, the stars have truly aligned. So that's really exciting to hear. So, what does a chief digital equity officer do? I mean, you talked a little bit about some of these, more strategic things just now, but tell me a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, going back to what I when I first saw the job posted, I was really what really drew me to this job, and especially having worked for the national organization that was really defining the shape of this field. That's NDIA. I got to see what people in similar roles, in similar like leadership roles, do in other municipalities. So I got to see how they did it. But what was impactful for me when I saw this posting was that this position of Chief Digital Equity Officer lives without getting too. I'm going to get wonky for a second, but I promise we're taking us somewhere. It's posted in a division called External Partnerships, and that really clicked something within me because it meant that the city was being pretty intentional about not putting this work in sort of like an infrastructure sort of role. Like certainly internet access is important to all of this work, but the fact that this position lives in a division called external partnerships really clicked with me because this role is essentially people oriented, right? A lot of what we would do with the National Digital Inclusion Alliance is come up with definitions for digital equity and digital inclusion so that practitioners and advocates and other people in leadership roles across the country um, can align their communities around a shared mission and a shared vision for what digital equity means. So digital equity is all about, getting residents and communities to a place where they can use and navigate the internet confidently so that they can fully participate in society, democracy, and the economy, recognizing that not every resident is there and not every community is there because of they might have been historically underserved or maybe there's a lack of resources. The question then becomes, how do we get them there? How do we get them to this goal or to this state of digital equity? And that's what digital inclusion is all about. That's the work that people put in every day to make this happen. So digital inclusion is defined along like three different elements. I'll say it this way, one of which is internet access. The second element is device access. So you got to have a computing device in order to get onto the internet. And those are sort of like the physical components of digital inclusion, right? The third and last component is digital skills. And that's really about like, who is going to teach someone how to use the internet? Who is going to be that person to help them remember their Facebook password or apply for a job or access online benefits or make a telehealth appointment? That's the human infrastructure piece of all of this. So what I do, getting around to your question as the Chief Digital Equity Officer, is oversee programs and policies for the City of New York that make those make uh, uh, those gateways for residents of the City of New York to be able to fully participate online um, through programs that we oversee.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to circle back around to the point about, getting wonky. This is the place to do that.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But I definitely want to like talk about like the context of what this challenge means within New York City, right? Like I was literally just in the city last week. I love it, but like there's so many different things that I would imagine. Like I'm sitting here getting overwhelmed for you thinking about all of these different challenges that you have to tackle for a city like as complex and huge as New York. So like what are those unique challenges? Like what are the things that, you're like, oh, thinking about like at night? Like I'm so curious.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this field, and again, I'm coming from the national framework and zeroing into what this means for me living in New York City, doing this work for my neighbors and my friends and family who lives here. So the difference in about digital equity in New York versus somewhere else in the country, for instance, is that folks in, let's say, more rural parts of the country are focused on access. Like the question in other parts of the country is like, well, I can't think about digital equity if I don't have a home internet connection, right? That's an issue for somewhere else. Here in New York, access is everywhere. Like the fiber is laid, the infrastructure is there. So in a sense, like there's a few different ways that one can approach this, right? In a sense, it's like, okay, well, the issue of access has been close to being solved. It's not 100%, but it's close to being solved. So people do have access to the internet, but the question still remains, why doesn't everyone have a home internet connection then, right? Like, even though the access is there, we can bring up the statistics from the American Community Survey. We know that not everyone in the city has a home internet connection. We know that not everyone has a computer at home. We know that quite a few households have only a smartphone at home. So to bring this back to those elements of digital equity, the question then becomes why? Why not? Like, this is the intersection where my job and, this office that I'm trying to build up here, that's where we attack this work, right? Why don't people have a home internet connection? Might start with asking someone, right? Like, we don't know what we don't know. For my previous work, I know that a common answer might have been that the internet is too expensive, right? That's like this $50 a month bill is too expensive for me, and I would rather spend that $50 on groceries or another item. Another reason that people don't have home internet might be that because they're afraid of it, right? Like, they might be, and that's really hard to get out of someone, to sort of like arrive at that idea or to admit that to someone. But at its core, I've heard variations on the answer where, I don't know, I don't have a home internet connection because I don't want it. I don't really know what's on there. I have concerns about my privacy. I'm afraid of phishing. I'm afraid of scams. These are all super valid reasons, and they exist all over in New York because as well resourced of a city we are, that means that there's an exponential amount of reasons that people might still be living in the digital divide. So, especially for a city as diverse as New York, which has, you know, I love living here, but I look around and I see that there's, especially in the digital equity world, there's a risk for, historically underserved communities like seniors, people with disabilities, people who have English as a second language. I see that there's a risk for them to be only further left behind as technology continues to move forward, and the internet becomes more of a part of our everyday lives. So that's the thing that keeps me up at night. But again, I'll flip this on its head, right? Like, New York is big. New York has a variety of potential of challenges, especially digital equity. But on the flip side, New York is also super well resourced. Like, there's a ton of people who are doing amazing work here. We have 3 different library systems who attack this digital equity work in different ways, which is super valuable because ultimately it means that the residents of those library systems and in each borough, right, they get programming that are more tailor-made to their unique interests and their unique values. So there's things that we can lift up here because New York, like, it is the biggest city, and we do have like incredible resources and a lot of passionate people here. So a lot of the things that I think about is like, how do I get all of these people in the room together to start sharing resources, start talking about this work in an intentional way moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the digital equity roadmap, which you all published earlier this year, I believe in March. So talk to me a little bit about how this roadmap, right, this document, is helping kind of guide the search for answers and to some of
Mhm.
these, these challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the roadmap it was published before I came into this role, and of course I'm in the digital equity world, so I read it first thing when it came out, and I was in the same way as me seeing that this position lives in an external partnerships division. When I was reading the roadmap, it was really pleasing for me to see that the roadmap laid out its 11 priorities to further digital equity programs and policies. They laid out those 11 priorities across those same elements of digital inclusion. So there was like, how are we going to address internet access? How are we going to address device ownership? How are we going to address the digital skills gap? Right? Like this, I saw that there was very thoughtful thinking from the city around these 11 tactical ways that the city can utilize these amazing resources that I was just describing in order to progress digital equity for all of New York here. So some of those programs and policies. One of the programs that we're really proud of is the Big Apple Connect program. Just last week, we announced a 3-year renewal of that program. And for folks who don't know, the Big Apple Connect program is a program for residents of New York City Housing Authority developments. That's NYCHA. This is almost 330,000 households. It's a program for folks in NYCHA developments to get free internet and free cable at home. It's amazing, right? Like, that's a program that we're really, really proud to stand up, and we are getting ever so closer to getting all households to opt in for that program, because we know that internet access, again, it's like a basic commodity for existing today in the 21st century. Earlier, and that was one of the programs described in the roadmap. Another, and not to describe all 11, but just another one that I want to highlight, is a program that is the city's version of a digital navigators program. So I mentioned this earlier. Digital navigators is like one-to-one support. Think of this as like an Apple Genius bar, except that person doesn't live in an Apple store. They live in a trusted community-based organization, like a library or like a social service organization. So the people who are delivering this one-to-one tech support are, in a lot of cases, like, these are people who are from the neighborhood. Like, they're helping their neighbors, and they're walking them through a lot of those same things that I used to do when I was working in libraries. Like, how do you click with a mouse? How do you turn on this iPad? So this reduces a lot of that, like, shame and fear that people might have around technology, because the people that they're talking with are people who, in a lot of cases, who they know. So yeah, the roadmap it's an excellent document, and in large part, like, bringing this back a few questions ago, like, in large part, what I'm doing as the Chief Digital Equity Officer is overseeing the implementation of all of those programs and strategies described in the roadmap.
Yeah. And so, it sounds like, behind you, you've got all of this like really interesting work and success under the roadmap. But I want to hear about like what you're thinking of towards the future, right? Like, what has the roadmap laid out for like the next 6 months to a year to 5 years? Like, what are the remaining goals that you guys have?
hmm Yeah, I mean, so I will first acknowledge that, like, this office and iterations of digital equity within the city of New York, like, it has existed before. Like, I'm not inventing this out of nowhere. Like, I want to acknowledge the good work that people who have been in this role before me, what they've set up. So what I would like to do, like, my big goal is to continue building upon the good work of my predecessors who have held a similar version of this role, let's just call it. So I really want to stand up the office in a way that reflects an intention from the city to, be open with community-based organizations and researchers and practitioners. Like, we want to know who is doing work who is doing relevant work in the digital equity field, and how can we partner with you, right? Like, that's really all I want to know, and, like, that's my goal condensed, but, like, it's going to be hard to do that, right? Like, we're going to need to know, like, what channels we can reach out to, like, what ways in which it makes sense to partner. But a lot of it in this way, I think about to my previous role on the national scale, which was a lot of, like, education for people around what exactly digital equity and digital inclusion is. Like, I think that the hardest type of person, or the hardest type of organization to reach, from my perspective, is that organization that is doing digital equity work, but they don't call it that. They don't even know that this field exists. Like, they're doing something that's, like, marginally related to getting people online and maybe using their app, or accessing a specific type of benefits. Like, that's digital equity. Like, if people need to get online in order to do X, Y, and Z, but they don't know how to do it for a variety of reasons, like, that describes a lot of potential partners for us. But my role is really, like, standing up the office in such a way that people can find us, right? Like I think I would like to sort of stand us up as a place that partner organizations, community anchor institutions, like they think of our office when when they have this specific issue of, trying to get their constituents or their customers or whoever online, but they might be having some difficulties around that. So that's my big goal, and the roadmap certainly gives me and my colleagues a framework to achieve that. But that's this idea of like this like educating people and socializing people around what digital equity is, like that's in the back of my mind, as a long-term goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And more to the point about the definition, right? I would be remiss if I didn't touch on the fact that the context politically around the word equity is quite heated at the moment. But earlier this year, of course, President Donald Trump canceled the Digital Equity Act, which was meant to provide millions to the states, which would eventually then trickle on down to the city, right, for digital equity related projects. But he said that the word, or I guess the issue with the act, right, was that it was unconstitutional, and the word equity meant that it was a giveaway based on race, essentially vilifying this word equity. How are you thinking through some of these challenges related to just the word and this moment? I mean, you touched a little bit about like working with folks that don't even know that they're doing digital equity, right? Like, how are you thinking through this?
Yeah. I mean, it's something. It's this is the year, right? Like the DEI thing. Like my response to this is that like call it whatever you want. Like the challenge of getting someone online and maybe overcoming a fear of getting online, or maybe overcoming the barrier of the internet being too expensive, like that's still going to exist no matter what we call it, right? Therefore, this office and the work of like my peers across the country, like we still need to do the work. So regardless of what you call it, like the field is still is still going to be here. Like it was a real shame to see the Digital Equity Act being taken away. Like myself and a lot of my peers across the country were like really looking at that pot of funding as a way to advance the goals that we had been talking about as like a pie in the sky thing for so many years. So I won't lie and say that wasn't like that didn't hurt, but the work still has to be done. So no matter what you call it what you will. Um, I think like tactically, and I've been again talking with peers around the country to address the sort of like quote unquote like the attack on DEI. I mean, without using the word equity, it becomes sort of an interesting and I would say like a fun challenge to describe this work while not using those words. In fact, it's like a fun workshop-y thing to do, like describe what you do, but don't use the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's where I think like using as many examples as you can to describe the work to again make it make sense to someone who might not share your point of view, but also make it make sense to someone who might be doing the work of digital equity but doesn't call it that. So this is where practical examples, again, like scheduling a telehealth appointment, accessing online banking, FaceTiming your friend, or again, like this example that I always come back to of like forgetting your Facebook password. Like my mom calls me and she's like, I forgot my Facebook password. I'm like, all right, mom, let's do it. Like, I'm going to be your digital navigator. Like, those are practical examples that everyone, I would think that most people can have experienced like a version of that in some way, shape, or form. And like, if you can get that to click with someone, then they're listening to what digital equity is. Like, that's kind of the trick. Like, they don't know it, but then you can be like, okay, there's this whole field that talks about this all the time. Like, let me bring you in. I want to hear your perspective. I think it's super valuable. So again, like it's a, it hurt when the Digital Equity Act went away, but I think it kind of posed an interesting challenge for us because again, the work needs to continue.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, totally. I am so excited now. The next time my mom calls me to similarly ask me to resolve something, normally with an iCloud,
Yeah.
to refer to myself as the digital navigator of our family. So thank you for that. She's going to be so annoyed. But the reason why we're talking, of course, to kind of wrap all of this up, is that it's OTI's Digital Inclusion Week. So tell me a little bit about that, why it's important, and where can folks find out more about New York City's digital equity efforts?
Sure. Yeah. So as OTI, I can't take credit for Digital Inclusion Week. This is a national movement that again my old organization, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, sort of started this week. I think like 9 years ago at this point, but it's an annual week in which, again, like the digital equity field. So this is practitioners, advocates, local, regional, state government. They get together to advocate for digital equity and really bang the drum for people to understand like what this field is and why it's so important. So it's happening this week, the October 6th to the 10th, and OTI's event is just one of many across the country. What makes our event so special, however, is that we're inviting digital equity practitioners both from within the city, so several city agencies, like the Department for Youth and Community Development, the Department of Aging, parks, anyone again whose work involves getting people online to access their resources, which again is most people and most agencies. So we're inviting those agencies internally, but we're also extending the invitation, of course, outside of the city government. So we want to get people who are in the public library systems. We want to get people who are working for community-based organizations that, again, like they might be working with or servicing like specific populations, like an organization that works specifically with seniors in the Bronx will be attending this. And those are the sorts of people that we want to get in the room. We're really looking at this event as a way to start building towards what I would describe as like a digital inclusion ecosystem where people start to know like who's doing what and who can I talk to about X, Y, and Z. And we're viewing our role as the city as like a convener. Like we have like a 10,000 foot view of like we have an idea of like who's doing what and where and with whom, but we want all of these organizations and all of these people to talk with each other and to learn about each other's work so that there might be a more fluid exchange of ideas in this world. So, we're looking forward to Thursday. It's at Civic Hall in Union Square. It's going to be a morning only event from 9 to 1 p.m. Ideally, a future iteration of this event is a full day, and maybe we can make it multiple days. But right now, we want it to start small and get some people in the room to have something on which to build. So for more information, you can go to the digital equity page on the NewYorkCity.gov website to find more about not only that event, but all of the roadmap and all of the other efforts that we have moving forward.
Paolo Balboa, Chief Digital Equity Officer for New York City. You can read more about Balboa and the roadmap at statescoop.com and in links in today's show notes. You can subscribe to the Priorities Podcast at prioritiespodcast.com and wherever you get your podcasts. While you're there, be sure to leave a review or a rating on the podcast page. That small extra step helps more people like you find the show. This podcast is a production of Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. The StateScoop editorial team provides our news coverage and interviews. That team is Colin Wood, Keely Quinlan, and Sophia Fox-Sowell. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher produce the show, and the entire Scoop News Group team makes it happen. Until next time, I'm Jake Williams. Thanks for listening.